Breaking news. The world's still mad and predictable, which is actually quite a weird combo when you think about it. UK Labour leader Insincere Starmer has received his invite to Davos, presumably to be groomed as the next World Economic Forum puppet leader of the UK. Now I wonder, was it the plastic welder's visor, taking a knee every 20 minutes, or not knowing what a woman is, that really endeared him to Klaus? It makes no odds who you vote for here in the UK, of course. Both major parties are fronted by cult fluffers, and their policies will be almost identical. Labour are the Tories, they've just got a pride flag. In the US, Anthony Fauci is standing down, although it's hard to believe he was ever really standing up, to be fair. And many will celebrate that, rightly. You know, the guy is as trustworthy as Vladimir Zelensky, but it looks like Peter Hotez is itching to replace him, so be careful what you wish for. Hotez is Bill Gates' vaccine-obsessed mate who thinks anti-vaxxers are more dangerous than terrorists. Best of luck, America. UK hotels are still full of men that try to enter the country illegally. Not seeing many women and children, but I'm sure they've just nipped to the shops. The government has kindly allowed local homeless people to sleep in the hotel car parks, so that's nice. Hundreds of hotels have been taken over at the cost of billions to the UK taxpayer so that fighting-age men from anywhere and everywhere can stay in the country. John Mappin, the owner of Camelot Castle Hotel in Cornwall, took a call from the Home Office in which they wanted to take over his hotel. And when he asked what he should do with his staff, he was told to let them go. So riddle me this. A Tory government supposedly infamous for institutional racism and complete disregard for human rights, instead of deporting men that arrived illegally, is housing them in hotels all over the country and telling the hotel owners to simply let the staff go, creating more unemployment. Why? Why are they doing that? Who are these men and what is the end game? I've seen videos of some of these guys admitting they're military. One in a video shared by John O'Looney this week states that they're working with the UK military and special ops. So I ask again, who are these men and why are they being placed all over the UK? Now it's a question that will probably get you called a racist, but it doesn't mean it doesn't need asking. Welcome to Right Now. Our final guest joins us from New York. Annika Lucas was sold by her mother as a child sex slave to a paedophile network in Belgium. Annika was raped daily by older men, many of them prominent Belgian politicians, until she was 11 years old. At 11, she was considered no longer useful to the network. She was tortured to be killed. She was saved from death by a man negotiating with a politician in charge of the network. Annika, thank you so much for talking to us. The first thing that really struck me was the fact that you were sold by your mother. As a parent, I struggle to compute that. How do you process that?
That's a lifelong process because, of course, my mother is the person that I was closest to. I guess we all are, our primary caregiver. She was also alone when she had me. And then, my mother was not well. She was mentally ill, you could say. She was never diagnosed. I would say she was a psychopath. And the way that sometimes translates to females is that she was extremely fawning to all men. She sort of acted like a 5-year-old flirtatious, weirdly flirtatious, sexualized little girl to all men, submitted herself very easily. And then I guess I was an extension of herself. And it was very difficult to be around her because there was really never any room for me. It was a complete projection. I was either sort of a weak, bland, ugly little girl that was her little helper, and then I was good, or I was evil. And then, but the thing is that your question is sort of the ultimate question. How can anybody do this? How can the adults in the network, how can they do this to children? And many of them were parents. Many of them, I'm sure, were incestuous parents as well. And it's that emotionally, my mother was not developed past probably the age of 5 or something. It's the time that her mother died. She came from massive trauma that I must assume mostly, but also it was 39 in Belgium. It was a town that was bombed a lot during the war. Her father was a prisoner of war in a concentration camp. her, and with her mother's death and other deaths in the family, I think that it would have been very difficult. There were little resources available for people to heal from trauma after the war. So she passed, in provincial Belgium. She totally passed. Maybe people thought she was a little sexual because it was very Catholic community, but she passed. And I was her primary victim.
It's so difficult to understand the mentality, like you said, the mentality that would sell their own child into this, but also the people that can carry this out. It's very hard for people to get their heads around the fact that people are capable of such evil. How old were you when you realized the depth of evil? Because that's not something that a child should ever have to even begin to process.
Right. Well, the network is very dark. And I was, as you said in the introduction, I was really in the Belgian network, which sort of acted like a mafia, but it was run by the then Minister of National Defense. So this was a politician who had a stellar career in Belgium. He was prime minister twice. So Paul van den Boeynants, I've named him in my book. And it was really connected to, so it was a local network, if you will, a Belgian local net. The Belgians, it's a small country, as you know. It was a small network, but they were connecting through Satanism to other more highly placed Satanists, and used children as a commodity always. So I was used both from the age of 6, when I started being trafficked. I was late because the network usually takes children from satanic families much earlier. So at age 6, I was put in the network, and I was used in Belgium for either certain aristocrats who were extremely violent and sadistic, who also had no qualms killing children. And so there's really no reason that I did survive that. And then at age 9, I was, these first years, I was also used a lot for men that were being indoctrinated into that system. So it was really a system of blackmail where they would be, first put together with a younger, with a girl who was maybe 14 or 15, maybe told she was older, then caught on tape. So then that's the beginning of the blackmail, and then they would end up with me. So of course, 6, 7 years old, there's no question that this is a very young child. And so anyone who goes along and does rape a young child like that, even though I was maybe inviting them, I had been taught to make them feel comfortable. But even so, that there's no question that this is that you're committing crime. And I was always expecting men to say, "Oh, I'm not doing this. I can't do this." But I didn't realize at the time how deeply these men were already indoctrinated, and that it takes the kind of person, as they say, who will do anything. And that's to say, people who I always felt that the people that were abusing me had themselves been abused as children, and that they were repeating from the position of power, so that they were overcoming their own sense of powerlessness and helplessness from their abuse through this very raw act, where they got to feel high in the position, being in the position of power. And of course, most survivors do not become perpetrators, but the system is set up to allow people who are ready to become perpetrators, or pushing people to become perpetrators, to have this huge, big secret of the pedophilia as a way in, as to keep everyone in their pocket. And that extends, though.
Do you still see some of the people that abused you on your television or on newspapers in Belgium?
in Belgium and all, and look, it wasn't limited to Belgium. I was trafficked to the United States, to France, to Switzerland, to Italy. And, at age 9, you could say I was traded up to an international networker who took me to the United States. This was someone who's very visible on the world stage. During this time, I was mind control trained. I spent sort of a year, what I call at the seat of power. So these were a group of very powerful people, Satanists, including celebrities, politicians, royals. And of course you see those people. Of course I see them still. Even though most of my perpetrators are now dead, because they were so prominent, they're everywhere.
That must be extraordinary for you to see that, with the knowledge that you have about who these people really are.
Yes.
How does that make you feel to see them? It's probably a stupid question, but I would imagine anger.
Yes, actually, it makes me want to name them, which is something that I can't do. And I've been, it's been made very clear to me that if I do, I will be dead. My family will be killed. That has sort of been the message that I've been getting. And apparently the family of my main perpetrator, I've found out that they have their own secret service. It seems that I've experienced that a little bit. That's all these people showing up in my life and that were trained the way I was trained to be a spy, so I could recognize it. But the message was very clear, in their way. They let me know that the threat was always, you name this person, you're dead. And, I think a lot of survivors like myself would be happy to give our lives to the cause if it would be worth it. But you always have to weigh and balance out what is okay to reveal and what is not. And so it does make me very angry. It also makes me very angry how most people believe the narrative that these are these wonderful people, that they are propped up to as they are propped up to be viewed.
Of course. I remember as a kid here in the UK, there was a massive paedophile network in Belgium that was uncovered, and it made world news. It certainly made major headlines here in the UK. Would that have been connected to the network that you were involved with, or would it simply be maybe a case of people are getting a little bit close to the truth? Let's throw them a few kind of lower level paedophiles to kind of almost quench the thirst a bit while we protect these big name people.
Well, that's exactly what it ended up being. That you're referring to what is known as the Dutroux case. So I will show my book, because I actually do write about the Dutroux case in my book, which is very closely linked to my story. It's the same network, basically, that you heard about in 1996 when those when bodies of children were uncovered. 2 children were rescued from a dungeon, and a pimp for this Belgian network had started kidnapping children, which was really unusual. And he was caught, and children had died in his care, because obviously most of the pimps would infiltrate into a family and then take the children and bring them back home. So I myself would go to school. So it was much easier. There were no parents looking for me. My parents were involved, as were most of the parents of the children that were used. So the Dutroux case was supposed to blow all that up. Marc Dutroux was that pimp. And what happened then, it was a very big case. It was worldwide. They were talking about the network worldwide. And what happened was really quite extraordinary, in that it took 8 years for the case to go to trial. A lot of survivors came forward and gave evidence, testimony that was checked and double checked by some really good cops, detectives who found correlations, that things that these survivors should not have known, would not have known if they hadn't been there. I was not in Belgium at the time. I barely knew. I found out about the Dutroux case after the first judge was already, the first person in charge of the case was already fired for supposedly partiality, which caused the white marches at the time, the whole Belgian population in uproar because there were child victims. Everyone was dressed in white to denote the innocence of the children. But 8 years later, there was a huge, massive attempt to quench this knowledge. All the witness accounts were cut off from the case. 30 people died who had any kind of evidence relating to the larger network. Many important factors were pushed off the case and were created. A new file was created that was going to be a different case. So by the time the trial in 2004, it was just Marc Dutroux, and then the one person that was closest, really, that was a little higher up in the network, that was Michel Nihoul. And Michel Nihoul, I write about extensively in my memoir because he started when I was there. So I was there from 69 to 74. I dealt a lot with Michel Nihoul. He was sort of the gopher. He was the middle person for everything. He ended up getting off in this case. Marc Dutroux was basically sent to life in prison. He even escaped from prison at one point. There's attempts now to set him free. It's really quite amazing. It's sort of the Satanists going, we can do this, we can win. And
yeah, almost mocking in a way, and
absolutely mocking. I think that's a big sign of Satanists when they're mocking victims, mocking anyone who the victims were also, the survivors were also extremely mocked and derided, and of course this is something that continues.
Of course. Well, it's a way for them to exert even more power over you and make you feel helpless. Because you've written about your experiences, you're speaking out about your experiences. Are you then contacted by people that have had similar experiences in different countries, networks, say in the UK or in Germany or other places?
Yeah, so thank you. That's what I do basically all day. I work with other survivors. So because my story went viral, I think in 2016, I've been public since 2013. And I've been contacted by many other survivors. I work with them. I've had my 30 plus years of healing, which continues, of course, to this day. But because of that, because of circumstances and the way that I had the privilege really to focus on healing, I shared that. And so also, though, because I speak to people all over the world, it's rather the Western world, I should say. I work with people from England and the Commonwealth a lot. And then, of course, Europe, pretty much all over Western Europe, and of course, the United States. That this network, there's similarities everywhere. There's slight differences. So children that get in through the, military families, but the mind control is similar everywhere. The mind control training is similar everywhere. The purpose for each child is different depending on their rank. That depends on their families. But there's these huge similarities in the way that the network works, which I've learned that, so the smaller networks, like the Belgium is one, they connect to, so they have a few powerful people through secret societies, whatever, in their town, and that then can keep the control or can mess with investigations if necessary. There's a judge, there's a lawyer, there's somebody, police commissioner or something. There's doctors, and then they connect through their own children often to people that are more powerful in the world. And that's how they protect their positions, or they protect their reputations, or they climb whatever they want. Really, it's sort of whatever you seek, whatever your ambition is, you can definitely accomplish things by being part of this network in the world. And that was very much at the expense of a lot of children.
You have a workshop coming up, I believe, called Shifting the Power. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, thank you. So in my website has it. I spent 10 years working inside the prisons of New York. I founded a nonprofit organization to bring yoga into the prisons. And from the beginning, I started teaching yoga, which was back in the 2000s. I'd always used yoga as a healing modality, but found it very difficult to use because of the way that it was taught. So I always have been thinking, if you are going to be a provider, a teacher, a therapist, there's a way to be with people that is not helpful. And I've been very much on the receiving end of the not helpful kind, whether it's therapists or yoga teachers or anything. So I worked through these programs in prison. I worked to find a method really to be fully present with on a horizontal level, because we all have invitations to take part in this power structure. So we all get invited to, get a degree and then take our role. And then to the degree that we need that status and that we need that position, we can cover over our own trauma, and we can then put ourselves above the people that we work with. And of course, a lot of therapists do that as well. Especially the more specialized you get, the more it happens, in my experience. So it's for each provider really to look at themselves, to look at the psychology, how you are unconsciously participating in the power structure. Who do you give your power away to, and who do you look down upon? And if you can assume that it really is about unresolved trauma, that if you look up to someone and you give your power away, you put someone on a pedestal, you're looking at an authority figure from your own childhood that you have unresolved stuff with. And if you look down on someone, if you judge someone, you're negatively projecting. And that has to do with some parts of yourself that you haven't really accepted yet. So that's really the premise and the unconditional model. And so this workshop is a 10-week online workshop, and each class. And I think it's I've done it. I've actually already traveled the world and taught particular therapists who are very on this information, really, that this going deeply into power dynamics and how they are related to trauma. For asking that question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing to talk to you, even though the subject matter is as horrific as it is. Talking to you about it, you exposing it, and helping other people that are in the same thing, it still feels uplifting in a way. Do you know what I mean? I hope people at home don't think I'm talking nonsense, but it still feels uplifting to talk to you, because you've gone through such horrific things, but you're almost flipping it, as you're saying with your workshop. You're shifting the power, and that's fantastic.
Yes, thank you.